What is up, everybody? We are finally conducting this interview. I'm sitting here with two of the four members of Ponderware. I'm here with Brooks and Anna Marie. How's it going?
Hello.
Oh,
I'm so stoked to have this conversation. I've been a big Mooncat community member since the rediscovery, and I've been so just encapsulated by the lore, the narrative, the technicals behind it. But with the rediscovery, there's about 4 years of history that's relatively unknown. So I hope that we can uncover that, also about you guys and some of the future plans. So the easiest way to start off is, I guess, just start off in the beginning. We'll start off with Brooks. I know when Ponderware first launched Mooncats, you actually were not on the team, but you were just a also community member who loved the technicals. I read that Reddit post that you wrote about the technical analysis of Mooncats, which I will link below. So just give everyone a brief story of who Brooks is and how you got involved with Mooncats.
sure. So yes, I'm Brooks. Go by Midnight or Midnight Lightning on various online communities. Myself, my arc through the crypto sphere and into the Mooncat sphere, that I first learned of cryptocurrencies in about 2012 with Bitcoin, and as a developer looking into the people at the time who were interested in launching new projects. You did that by forking the Bitcoin code and launching your own coin, which I helped a few people do from the technical side. And all the way through to 2017, that the original Mooncat contract launched August 9th in 2017. The contract was activated the day after, but I missed the first day and didn't hear about it until a newsletter or an email, I believe, clued me into that project, and it was August 14th that I first noticed the project. I was immediately intrigued because of its blend of technology and art, on how they were creating that world. And so I rescued several Mooncats that first day, or the first day that I heard about it, which was, depending on how your math goes, the fourth or the fifth day of the contract being around. And then as a developer, wrote up the technical breakdown of what was actually going on with the contract as I had researched it and figured out what actually is making this project tick, and posted that to their Reddit, which was one of the first, descriptions of what the project really was from a third party perspective as outside the development team at that point, and remained relatively active for the what is now the gap time between 2017 and 2021, periodically answering questions that people had about it. But the interest in it didn't really spark until non-fungible tokens and NFTs was a more common media term. When the original project in 2017 was launched, it just wasn't a term that was used. And yeah, the time just wasn't right for it to catch fire, apparently.
How about you, Anna Marie?
I joined Ponderware in May of this year, and I actually got into the project through Brooks. Brooks and I have known each other for about a decade in real life. And, many, many years ago, I jokingly said to him, hey, if you ever need a community manager, come talk to me because that's what I do for a living. And sure enough, earlier this year, after the project rediscovery, and Brooks had joined the Ponderware team, he messaged me and he said, hey, I know you joked about this, many, many moons ago, but we actually are looking for a community manager at this project that I do. Are you interested in applying? And I did. So that's kind of how I got started down the path of the kitties.
Well, we're glad to have you, our wonderful community manager. You have definitely helped out in the Discord, answering all the questions and kind of organizing everything from the chaotic mess that it was for a few months until you arrived. Brooks, I know you were, as you mentioned, you weren't part of the original Ponderware team, but there are a lot of questions surrounding the disappearance, I guess we could call it, for the 3 years from 2018, 19, 20 until the rediscovery. Can you articulate on what happened there, at least to the best of your knowledge? And then can you explain a little bit about the other two team members who are relatively unknown as well?
Sure. And so yeah, the original team, Ponderware as a handle is a company name, and so it's a plural. The original was two different individuals. WanderWonder and Jurfles were the two developers who were friends who created the project, and so they launched it together as a joint venture. And they were active in the community for the first year or two to it, and then as the community seemed to not be catching on, or the project itself was at a place where they were not making money off of it and still had to maintain the infrastructure costs of running the servers and such. At that point in time, there weren't things like the Infura networks or those sorts of things that they were running their own node to keep the infrastructure up. They did let their own node fall offline to keep their own costs down. And eventually there was also an update to MetaMask that broke some of the adoption center functionality that they didn't keep up with the development on. And so the main website they did commit to keeping up. They wanted to keep that historical website up. And it turns out as the project was rediscovered, that was a critical piece that even though the Ethereum node was down behind the website itself, the code for generating the searching algorithm was still working because that was all within the browser based. And that was partially essential for people who wanted to manually interact with the contract to figure out what the seed was to fulfill the algorithm to actually mine a Mooncat, to rescue a Mooncat at that time. And so, yeah, it was the project for several years, they kept up with it, but then it did fall into disrepair as they needed to move on to other projects.
That's what I had heard. There was something with the MetaMask where you had the inability to claim it. But so during this time, we have this weird disparity of numbers that were claimed throughout the years, roughly 3,300 for 2017, 2,000 for 2018. Then it dwindles down to 71 for 2019 and 3 for 2020. How did those small fractions or those small Mooncats become claimed, even though that there was a bug within the system?
And that may be one of, the people who actually did do that claiming probably did do a similar process that the people in March of 2021 did of utilizing the website to figure out what the mechanics are and then manually interacting with the contract. The one thing that we as a Ponderware team, as developers, realized, marketing and outreach may not be our strong suit as computer developers, sort of a thing. And it kind of does show the pattern of the number of Mooncats that were rescued in 2017 and 2018, and then it starts to dwindle down as, the outreach and the word of mouth didn't really catch fire at that time. And so, those numbers are small, both because the website had fallen, behind in versions for what you needed to interact with it. And also, at that point, the word of mouth traffic just wasn't there.
Yeah, until the great rediscovery, which will go down in infamy as one of the greatest narratives for an NFT project. That's what attracted me so much. Another question regarding the original contract. I know it predates ERC 721 and it's ERC 20. I've seen you mention as ERC 20-ish. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Sure. From the technical backing, both ERC 20 and ERC 21 are standards, meaning the definition of it says if you want to be ERC 721 compliant, your contract must have these functions and the functions must do these things. And there's a handful, 10, 15 different functions that define the standard for both ERC 721 and ERC 20. For ERC 20, there's a set of functions that are standards for indicating how many of the thing an address has and how do you move the thing, as well as granting approval for another account to move your tokens. And I say ERC 20-ish because the original contract does fulfill some of them. It's enough that most wallets know how to check your balance to know how many of the original Mooncats you have. But because the whole premise of the project was trying to move towards a non-fungible asset, whereas ERC 20 is a fungible asset, they actually tweaked the code to make it where the normal transfer method of how you would transfer an ERC 20 token is not how you transfer an original Mooncat, because it matters which Mooncat you're moving, not just, I want to move 3 of them, sort of a thing. So they did, in the way that the original developers created it as a new token, they essentially forked the ERC 20 standard, because ERC 721 as a standard didn't exist at the time. So they kind of invented a proto ERC 721 by taking half of the implementation of ERC 20 and making it non-fungible.
Interesting. Yeah, I had to do a little bit of some manual labor there. There's a big debate right now about generative art. Who's first for generative art? What exactly is generative art? It seems to be very subjective. Would you consider Mooncats a generative art?
Yes, both from the perspective of that the code defines the artwork, but also the act of creating and rescuing the Mooncats. The person doing the rescuing had a say in how the Mooncat existed. As the project being situated between CryptoPunks and CryptoKitties, I think technology-wise, they are also very similar, or you can draw the connection between both of those. The CryptoPunks, which came before, CryptoPunks have their artwork predefined. It was an artwork that was created by the Larva Labs team. They decided how many of each and which ratios, and they created the artwork. And then the code base of it and how they were minted is just picking which one is relating to which token. Whereas with CryptoKitties, they have the breeding algorithm, and it's based on the DNA of the Mooncat or of the CryptoKitty, of how they actually breed. But when you choose two CryptoKitties to breed, you don't get to choose or see the result before you choose, do I actually want to breed these two together? Then in the middle of that is the Mooncat concept, where when you went to go rescue a Mooncat, your computer did some work to figure out a rescue seed, which actually essentially is the DNA of the Mooncat, and defined how that Mooncat looked. But then you got to see it and say, here's the Mooncat you found on the moon. Do you want to move it from the moon to the blockchain, essentially mint the transaction? And you had the option to say, no, I want to search for another one. And so that you as the discoverer could say, well, actually that string of DNA, which leads to this particular picture, it doesn't resonate with me. I want to find a different one. And so you were part of the generation of that, which kind of sits between those two generative ideas. But yes, definitely the part of the code that defines the identity of the Mooncat is by code how the Mooncat looks. The facing, the expression, the pose is all defined by that hexadecimal seed, which was part of the search algorithm that brought the Mooncat onto the blockchain.
So it's like an impromptu proof of work mechanism. You can say one of the first ones installed within NFTs. Probably explains how you got such a perfect 2019 Garf.
For that one. Yeah, myself, I remember that one for myself in that time, taking that idea of you get to pick which one it was. Part of the reason why I ended up with several of them is I wrote myself my own mining script and local website. I essentially forked their website and took their code, which on the website was search for a Mooncat, and then if you find a Mooncat, pause and stop mining and wait for the user to decide. I basically took out the pause so that it just kept finding and logged all the ones that it had found. And I left my computer on overnight. And then in the morning, I had like 50 different Mooncats, and I'd be like, I like that one from the ones to pick from. A few of them, I was being the mathematician or programmer, I was looking more at the numbers of the uniquely interesting hex strings. But I do remember one of the mornings was like, oh, that kind of looks like Garfield. I should grab that one. And at that time, I didn't really think that that would catch on as it's a character cat. Nowadays, yeah, the community seems to have decided those are more interesting than the actual numbers behind it. I'll still look at the numbers. And yes, I happened to grab a few of them. It was on a whim at the time to think, oh, yeah, it's kind of orange and stripy like a Garfield.
Yeah, upon that rediscovery day, I think, was it you in the Discord? Somebody was in the Discord mentioning how the dev team loved Garfield and that was their favorite cat. And that was definitely the beginning of the narrative between character cats, and it's kind of taken on. But that's the cool part about Mooncats, is that there's the aesthetics and the pixelated nostalgia, you could call it. But the metadata is where a lot of the collectors and investors are beginning to find a lot of the value. It's
interesting that a lot of the metadata that the community has now started to place value in didn't exist in the actual original contract. The idea of like what year they were rescued in. Ponderware couldn't define that in the original code. And whether or not an identical clone exists, Ponderware couldn't define that. That was completely dependent on who rescued what. And so like several of these things, it's neat that it's an organic growth of, now that we have a complete set, people are drawing parallels of what is interesting within this set of 25,440 items, that now that it is a complete set.
It's the most intricate collection that I've ever come across. Before we start talking about the values and stuff, one more question I'd like for you to clear up. Explain a little bit about the on-chain versus off-chain versus partially chain. Are Mooncats fully on-chain? Are they not? And then if they aren't, is there a plan to become fully on-chain?
Sure. So the piece that is definitely on-chain is the DNA piece of the Mooncat. Their 5-digit or 5-byte hex string, which looks like a 10-digit, 10-character ASCII string, is what defines what they look like. The way that those numbers move to whether the Mooncat is facing left or right or has an expression or has a different pose is defined in the original website from Ponderware in a JavaScript library. And so that logic of how the DNA relates to the picture is canonically in a JavaScript library, and that JavaScript library, the contents of it were not put on chain, but the hash of that library is on chain in the original contract to prove this is the logic we intend of how the DNA becomes a picture. And so that piece of it, the original source code being bigger, they didn't put it directly on chain, but the hash of it is there. But that's now something that could be put on chain. And similar to how the CryptoPunks moved there, they did a similar thing of the original graphic with all the CryptoPunks is not on chain, but they put a hash of the original large picture in the original one. We could now do the similar thing with Mooncats, that putting the same logic and proving, oh yeah, the logic that the JavaScript is following is the same as we're following here in the Solidity code. And therefore, yes, moving it on chain would be an option and something that we've been looking into.
Yeah, it's something that we've definitely been talking about amongst the Ponderware staff. It's like, all right, how do we get everything on chain?
Yeah, that seems to be a debate, and it seems to increase value, at least from community members' perspective from it.
The one thing we did do, because the boutique and the accessories were launched after sort of this discussion and sort of the importance of it being on chain, the coding of the accessories is fully on chain. When you do the designers who create the pixel patterns for what the accessory looks like, that does get directly embedded on chain. And so those were from the ground up completely on chain. And our intent with part of that was figuring out the technology of how can we do that in the most efficient way possible, the most gas efficient for the person minting it, that we can then translate that method for the Mooncat artwork itself moving into there. So yes, that was somewhat of our proving ground of getting the raw image data recorded in there. Once those are there, both the accessories and the Mooncats would be fully on chain.
Soon. Speaking of the boutique, seems like these accessories are just blowing up. There's some crazy combinations, some that look awesome, some that I question what is happening, but it's all fun and games. It seems like a lot of people are beginning to pay premium for these accessories. Can you explain a little bit about what ERC 998 is, and also what the vision of the boutique was, since this was the first real big product that Ponderware put out outside of their wrapper?
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to flip the questions on you.
Okay.
So, one of the things that when WanderWonder and Jurfles came back to the project, one of the things that they sort of said to each other is immediately is like, all right, we want to do something new and different within the Mooncat ecosystem, because Mooncats itself was really new and different when it launched in 2017. And so accessories sort of grew from that idea of like, what can we do that's novel and within our, reach, and has some cool potential for it. And so, originally the idea was just strictly accessories, but sort of as the Ponderware team grew, Brooks and I came on board, that concept sort of evolved from not just accessories, but the boutique itself, where you can make something and it sits behind a Mooncat as a background. You can make something that sits in front of a Mooncat, but isn't necessarily wearing it. You can do all sorts of accessories that you put on and take off. And so, that was the sort of missing piece of like, all right, how do we go from accessories to a full-blown boutique, and why was it accessories in the first place? I'm going to have Brooks tackle the 998 stuff because he does much better with the technicals than me.
Sure. Because yes, ERC 998 is yet another one of those standards that has been evolving on the Ethereum ecosystem. ERC 998 is not finalized currently, but we did, as part of the wrapping contract, the acclimating process for Mooncats did include the functionality to make it, at least as far as the standard was so far, compliant with the ERC 998 functionality. The main idea behind the ERC 998 concept is, instead of an Ethereum address owning an ERC 721, or basically an address owning an NFT, that an NFT must be held in an address, adding in the ability for an NFT to own or contain another NFT. And so as of right now, yes, there is capability for a Mooncat, not necessarily the Mooncat's owner address, but the Mooncat itself can own another NFT. And right now, the functionality that's baked in is, it would be, if it's an ERC 721 asset, a Mooncat could be given that. And if the ownership of the Mooncat changed, the ownership of the child NFT would stay. It would stay with the Mooncat, and therefore the new owner of the Mooncat would be in control of it. And so from a technical perspective, when we were looking at the accessories as a possibility, that seemed like a nice way to have, like if you had a hat and you put it on the cat, that it would actually be a way to represent it is currently on that Mooncat and therefore travels with it. For the boutique, we decided to not actually use that infrastructure for the boutique as it currently is, because when we looked at how that would actually work for if a Mooncat were to change owners, we realized a lot of the marketplaces right now are not aware of or guarding against ERC 998 functionality. And so the risk would be, if a Mooncat were up for sale, the risk of front running, that if the current owner was malicious and had like a very valuable hat on it, and someone wanted to buy the Mooncat because of the accessory and launched the transaction to purchase the Mooncat, the current owner could quickly remove the hat before the sale happened, and the person would end up with the Mooncat but not the valuable accessory. And we wanted to prevent confusion with that, and that people would not be at a risk of that sort of an interaction. And so we did change the functionality for the boutique to be the accessories are permanently bound to the Mooncats and are not necessarily NFTs on their own. You cannot transfer the accessories independently. The accessories have to be bound to a Mooncat, and as the Mooncat moves around, they must move with that Mooncat.
Is there a way to eventually set up something where you could transfer the items, or is there any plan to introduce some sort of feature that can build on this idea?
Maybe. The way that they're set up right now, and Brooks, jump in if I'm totally wrong here. The accessories that are made under the current existing contract rules will never be able to be traded off of a Mooncat. Is there a potential in the future to make ERC 998 accessories available on the boutique where those could be sold on a secondary market? Yes. Is there like locked in 100% plans for that to be happening? Not currently, but it is something that we're continuing to explore. The door isn't shut on that. It's just not a priority right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's accurate. The current accessories will be permanent into the future. There's no way to detach them. And because of that, we leverage some of the ideas of having like some of the accessories be achievements or badges for specific Mooncats that, only specific Mooncats can earn certain things, and then you cannot transfer them off. And we wouldn't want to break that functionality to represent the achievements that a Mooncat has gotten. But yes, that 998 capability is there and able to be used in a future project if it becomes a good fit, whether marketplaces become aware of those sorts of things, or we make our own sort of marketplace that helps hold a Mooncat that's up for auction to make sure that accessories or child objects don't get separated before sale. There's lots of possibilities, but nothing on that is set in the stone at the moment.
Yeah, there's a few things about the boutique that I really like. One of them is that it keeps the money or the value accrual within the community, because you have contributors who can openly build an item and then sell it. But then it also raises the premium of the cat, or at least in this recent run up. And then those people who have the boutique items generally go and buy a cat. So it just like keeps the value within it. But also, I've never come across any other collection, NFTs or not, where you can actively accessorize or change the existing product. So I think that's like a completely innovative idea. I don't know if there's anything else out there. Are you aware of anything?
I'm not aware of any. And yeah, that it is I was intrigued by that as a reason why to develop it this way, of allowing the owner of the NFT to be able to personalize it, was a great draw for wanting to implement it in this way. And also the idea of having the designer be completely separate from the store, that it's possible for someone who doesn't own a Mooncat to design an accessory for a Mooncat. That's like,
and
that's
it was interesting
because
that. Yeah, that was a really big sort of like back and forth conversation, both when we were designing the boutique before we announced it, and then sort of pre-boutique launch, is everybody was sort of interested in, all right, should someone own a Mooncat before they're allowed to design in the Mooncats boutique. And ultimately we came down as no, because we want to be open to all sorts of different designers, whether they're new to the NFT space, whether they own a Mooncat, whether they don't. And that has actually been to our benefit, because I actually don't think Tusk owned a Mooncat before he started designing accessories. And he got tagged into a conversation on Twitter or in another Discord and like popped in and started designing. And he's done like 15 designs at this point. They're absolutely gorgeous. They sell out every time. I love the Godzilla, the Mecha
Yes, that's
Godzilla
my
that he
favorite
made
too.
a couple of weeks ago. And like, you know, if we had required someone to own a Mooncat before they started working in the boutique, that would be a collaboration that would have never happened. And I mean, at this point, we're almost at 1,000 accessories in the boutique. Some of them are infinite supply. Some of them are really limited. Some of them are already sold out. And, you know, we love that that ecosystem supports designers as well as Ponderware, as well as supporting the greater Mooncats ecosystem.
Yeah.
You know, that part was really important to us when setting it up.
Are there any plans or intentions to reach out to maybe designer brands to develop something within the boutique that can increase the marketing exposure?
Yeah, for sure. You know, we've talked to some artists and we've done some talks in terms of collaborations. You know, I kind of say on the Discord that we're always, and on Twitter, that we're always on the lookout for contact information at NFT friendly brands. We have done a little bit of cold calling, but cold calling sucks. So, you know, anytime that we can pick up information to make a contact, that's really important to us. So and I mean, obviously, if people have brands that they want us to coordinate with, you know, tag us at Ponderware on Twitter, tag the brand. You know, we're always looking for sort of those communication starters.
Are there any properties or maybe values that Ponderware looks for when vetting a potential collaboration with another developer? Like you guys had partnered with Sandbox and there's a little misinformation around there, miscommunication. What does Ponderware specifically look for in a collaboration?
Honestly, I think that we are sort of arms wide open at the moment. There really hasn't been any sort of collaboration that we've necessarily said no to, except for maybe one person who came to us and wanted us to be part of a kind of adult toned project. And like, we're not opposed to adult content. We're all adults. We're not opposed to mature themes, but we sort of like how Mooncats is approachable and family friendly, for lack of a better wording. And so, you know, we love that a collection as an NFT and as sort of a brand is family friendly and fun. And we kind of want to keep it that way.
Yeah, I think that too, especially the lore and the narrative and storytelling aspect behind Mooncats, I think is something that's strictly within the Mooncat ecosystem and maybe has set a precedent for some of these preceding projects afterwards to kind of characterize their NFT to more than just being a collectible.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely something that we try and maintain through our relationships. And even when, you know, people mention the Mooncat project and like use terminology that like we try and keep, you know, the lore term to it, we have reached out to a few of like, can we change the terminology to be like our in-universe terming for these things when they mention our project. And so yeah, those sort of relationships, it's been great for the teams that do honor that sort of, you know, history behind it and the continuing story. And so yeah, relationships where it is a continuing of the story and broadening the same product and not just making a completely new derivative cash grab sort of an idea are ones that we've been working with and have found to be fairly successful and an enjoyable process to work with.
And the lore of the Mooncat narrative begun on the Adoption Center, the original website. I know there's debates on whether to retire the website, to upgrade it, create your own marketplace. Where are you guys at within that discussion?
It's something that's still ongoing because, you know, one of the things that we talked about earlier is like WanderWonder and Jurfles sort of made a commitment to like always maintain the original website. And as like an encapsulated artifact, that will always be maintained to the best of our abilities, you know. But in terms of like are we going to retire the adoption center? Are we going to transform it into a place where you can buy both acclimated and unwrapped mooncats? Some of that stuff is still kind of a pretty hot debate amongst the Ponderware staff. And with all things, we're a small team. There's only 4 of us. And we have to sort of balance between maintaining the things that we have now and continuing to build out further into the ecosystem. And so, it might be easy to say, we'll just hire somebody else, but onboarding someone and getting them up to speed on the crazy behind the scenes stuff going on in programming Mooncats is unfortunately not as easy as it sounds on paper.
It's an extremely complex topic. And I know there's debate within the community on building something similar to like what Larva Labs have, so that the investors can save on the fees from the OpenSea fees or something like that.
For sure.
I know you guys are taking that all into account.
Yeah, and I mean it's a pretty spirited discussion. Like, we are talking about it almost every week. So yeah, it's an ongoing conversation. It will probably be a continuing ongoing conversation because there's no one good right answer.
Mhm.
So we got to think about all of the possibilities and then kind of go from there.
And it is a user experience of, as the, in general, as the Ethereum ecosystem is growing, the idea that, the open nature of the blockchain being that, yes, the Mooncat project existed, and then, OpenSea interacts with it because it follows a standard, and Rarible interacts with it, and the NFT 20 space was able to say, oh, we'll just make a pool, and fractionalize or make it as a pooled token there. The UGMC team can say, oh, we can fractionalize it using this tool over here. That's very easy to get this very diffuse, lots of building blocks that people have built on top of it. And there's lots of benefits from that. But then there's also the user experience of, well, where are the Mooncats? Well, they're in like 12 different places. Some of them have decided to go over here and some have gone over here. And so, helping rein that back in and figure out the user experience of how to show someone new, there are 25,440 of them, and having like one interface to be able to see all of them is a very hard undertaking. And also, the moment a new project that decides to fractionalize NFTs a different way pops up, it's a whack-a-mole game of making sure that all of them are covered. And something that we're continuing to look at. But it's also the people learning how to interact with Ethereum in general in this new space. It's a completely new way of interacting with a project that is represented on other people's platforms and websites. And some of them are your real assets that are now over there, and some of them aren't. They might be a copycat or a derivative sort of a thing, and helping the users figure out how to learn to identify which is which is a challenge that's still growing.
That's something that I think has hindered Mooncat's progress, at least from the start, was the building blocks that were built out in an inefficient manner, or the unofficial wrapper that I'm speaking on, right? Busting the bayou. We're trying to drain that pool on the NFT 20. What are your thoughts on the severed markets of Mooncats? There's about 5 now. There's unwrapped, there's wrapped in the pool, there's wrapped on OC, then you have acclimated pool and the acclimated market.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging, both as a company and, seeing people come into the ecosystem for the first time. And it's like, all right, I want to buy a Mooncat. What's a real Mooncat? And like, that barrier to entry is definitely something that we're sensitive to. And, we're trying to make things way more simplified. We have some things in the works that's going to assist with simplifying those. It's been kind of an uphill battle, convincing people to get out of the unofficial wrapper originally, but we've kind of hit a point where everybody understands the benefits of being in the acclimated official wrapper, and like the boutique being right there, Isotile being right there. People can see that we own land in the sandbox, and we can say, hey, only if you're in the official wrapper are you going to be able to benefit from these extensions of the ecosystem. That's pretty compelling for most people.
Yeah, it's unfortunate seeing some people get wrecked by the unofficial wrapper and not doing the due diligence, or the information wasn't out there. It sucks, but there's only one way there. I think there's maybe what are we at, like 3,000 unofficial?
Right around 2,700 as of this morning.
Oh, wow, that recent run-up's definitely been assisting with it.
Yep.
And speaking of other products, one of the big questions that I got on internet is everyone's very curious about your metaverse play with Sandbox and with Sports Ball. We'll start with Sandbox. Is there anything that you could speak on regarding that?
Yeah, no, we're in the process of dialoguing with Sandbox. We're really excited to be finalizing all of the plans for what we're going to do on our plot. Our plot's actually pretty big. And so, we want a mixture of both gamification and somewhere that either existing or potential users can come and like live in the Mooncats lore. And so we have a lot of ideas for what that might look like. And it's sort of a matter of checking with Sandbox. So like, all right, is this technically possible? What hooks do we need? What do we need to put into it? What are you going to put into it? More details to come on that. And in terms of the Sandbox Mooncat, which was kind of a small communication and breakdown at Sandbox, it is actually going to be replaced. And so there's going to be information on if you have a Sandbox Mooncat, how you can claim that sort of bounty. And the bounty will come in 2 steps where it'll be a short-term reward as well as a long-term reward. But we're going to make it worth your while to trade in your Sandbox Mooncat.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. And also regarding Sports Ball, which is something else that was on, which was on the roadmap. And I think that was something that ever since you entered the Mooncat community, you have been preaching on in the Discord. And when I did that video, I think it went all the way back to like the beginning of June when you started mentioning Sports Ball.
Yep.
So, yeah, how's that progress coming along?
So Project Sports Ball was kind of the next thing that we wanted to do after Boutique, although what classifies as after Boutique is sort of in an interesting winding road. We're pretty excited for the roadmap in general, and Sports Ball is going to be like our next big project. There's going to be little stuff that comes out beforehand, but it definitely has a lot of moving parts to it, and some of it we're still designing. So it won't be anytime soon. Like I know in your video you were like, maybe it'll be in the coming weeks, and I'm like, I'm hoping it will be this year. Don't be mad at me if it's early 2022. But on that note, we're actually going to be expanding the roadmap.
Ooh.
So we're going to have an update coming probably the end of August or the very start of September. So stay tuned for that.
I'll have to do a revision of the roadmap.
I'm sorry,
review.
I've depreciated your video already.
It's okay. Just it means that I have to continue the Cat Dad series in perpetuity. So your Sports Ball potentially beginning of 2022. Recently there was the Cuddle game, which was created by the team behind Nft Nyc. Were you guys in discussion about them building that? Has there been any collaborative effort, and then any opinions on the game?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the sort of collaboration we did with that game was fairly behind the scenes. We are all about supporting not fan works, like community works inside of the Mooncats universe. And so like Isatao, we were able to help them with sort of their design basics. And for the Cuddle game, he was showing it to us beforehand, and we gave some insight on like, all right, what terminology makes the most sense here? What's the name of the game going to be? What are some of the functions and features going to be called? And so like, he didn't need any programming assistance, but we gave a lot of feedback on like a lot of the different moving pieces. And we were really lucky that Adam was like super, super open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I toyed around with the game in beta. Unfortunate they had to pause it because maybe they opened it to too many people in beta, but I like the game, and also it keeps the value accrual within the system because you need the Mooncats to mine with all. Right. Also, they had like the farming and milk with their own boutique, which maybe you guys inspired them to do that. And I think this like play to earn kind of overlay is going to be very important to having NFT communities exist into, or have like a lengthy existence into the future, because it's just something that incentivizes everybody else to stay within the system.
For sure. And I have a sneaking suspicion that while we had most of Project Sports Ball mapped out already, there are some aspects that Cuddle used in their game that may end up showing up in Sports Ball.
Yeah, I have nothing against it. I think they had an update of maybe like a week or two to see what happens with that. But I do know it did seem like Cuddle kind of was a catalyst, with capital CAT catalyst, with the first run up. It seemed like a bunch of people were buying it, and there was like 3,000 cats that were playing. And so if that's any sort of precursor to what sports ball could be,
For sure.
then it's going to receive a lot of attention.
Yeah, and I mean, as Ponderware, I think the thing that sort of intrigued us in regards to Cuddle was like, all right, you had to have a Mooncat that's alive. And when the game originally came out, there was no way to check if your cat was available to play in the game. And so what a lot of people ended up doing was shortcutting to the eligibility check and just buying an unofficial wrapped Mooncat, which wasn't eligible for the game, and then acclimating it and then putting that into the game. So that was sort of an interesting sort of preview of like, oh, gee, I wonder if this will be something that Project Sports Ball sort of encourages as well.
There's so many game theoretics that are attached within the community and the severed markets. That's why I find it so fascinating. And one of the main reason why I decided to invest a lot into it and decide that this is the NFT community for me was the actual existing community that formed around it. I believe Dam created Mooncat Pro within like 2 or 3 days of the rediscovery, and all these other tools that have begun to flourish as to help everyone else figure out what's valuable, what's the right analytics. Obviously, a lot of developers seem to gravitate towards Mooncats, which is cool. So you get to understand a lot of the lingo. As being the community manager on Discord and actively involved, what is your perception of the Mooncat community?
I mean, obviously, I'm completely biased, but I think the Mooncat community is awesome. I mean, I love that all of us can come together from like all different walks of life and all different interests, and we all kind of get along. And it doesn't mean that like there isn't spirited discussion on the Discord, but I like that like everybody can kind of pull back from an argument and be like, you know what, we all like the cats. Is this really important to argue about? No.
Yeah, it's true. All right, I gotta ask this question because everyone seems to ask it, and maybe it's controversial or not, but why don't you guys put the Discord link in the Ponderware bio for Twitter?
So, it's interesting because during the rediscovery, a lot of the community that cropped up around Mooncats was completely driven by people that aren't part of the Ponderware team. And so, as we've grown as a brand and as we've grown sort of as our own company, the thing that we're most comfortable with right now is, well, the Ponderware account belongs to us. And so we're 100% comfortable promoting that because we're where the buck stops. In terms of the Discord is community run. We are there as advisors. The buck doesn't stop with us. And so it isn't that we don't trust everybody there, but ultimately, if something goes completely bananas, we are not the ultimate arbiters of what happens there.
Okay. Yeah. So
and it's a weird situation. Most brands don't run into this because they make their own stuff. And so, it's kind of a fine line between it. It isn't necessarily just that it isn't ours, but that like ultimately, if something blows up, we want to be responsible for something that is a Ponderware thing.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, not many other NFT projects had a crazy rediscovery where there was multiple thousands of people trying to come into a massive collection. Oh, there's a Genesis Pure Cat.
Hi, Eclipse. Yeah, and so here's kind of a little fun history for you. When the project was rediscovered, WanderWonder and Jurfles actually didn't even have Discord accounts.
But yeah, they had their primary social connections were the subreddit and Twitter. And indeed, in 2017, a lot more of the communication was happening in subreddits rather than even Telegram or Discord servers. And so, yes, the places that they had set themselves up for communications were elsewhere. And yeah, when they were originally told, hey, there's a community forming on Discord, step one was, what is Discord? Do I have an account there? Where do we actually get this thing to get them involved with it?
That's funny. So now that we've become acclimated with each other and with the wrapper, what are the plans for NFT NYC, which is also on the roadmap?
Ooh. So Brooks and Jurfles and WanderWonder are all going to be at NFT NYC. We are kind of there to see all of the things that everybody else is there to see. You know, we want to watch a lot of the talks. We want to do a lot of the networking. Part of the update to that roadmap is going to be talking about an IRL meetup for Mooncat owners, and there may be some swag involved.
Oh, I'm in that. I will be there. I already bought my tickets, so
Fantastic.
I will definitely see you guys there. Yeah, that's gonna be a really fun time. I know we kind of passed over this, but I'd like the explanation from Brooks because he was part of it. The burning of the keys for the remaining Genesis cats.
Never burn cats.
Well, they stayed to protect the moon.
Yes, they took the path of the heroes.
Can you expand on the idea? Well, first, what the issue was, and then just the whole situation surrounding it.
Sure. To just define what the state of things was, the original project, as designed from the technical perspective, was based on a lot of the numbers that computers like, which are powers of 2 instead of powers of 10. And so the original Mooncat Rescue project was designed to have 25,600 cats as part of it. 25,600 being 256, a power of 2 times 100. And so that was the complete set as designed. The only rarity sort of a thing that the original contract built in was a separation between what were considered rescued Mooncats and Genesis Mooncats. The Genesis Mooncats are identifiable as they're the only ones that are not colorful. They are the black or white ones. All the other Mooncats are very vibrantly colored. And so you can tell at a glance when one is a Genesis Mooncat, and those were set apart originally in the lore as they are the ones that even could blend in as a normal cat on Earth. They were the only ones that would possibly pass as a normal cat, maybe the exception of Garfields and Cheshires now, as a people might pass those over as just a normal feline. But the point being, the Genesis ones were set apart as distinct. And in the contract, they were distinct in how they were minted into existence. The rescued Mooncats were available for anyone for no additional ether, only the cost of gas. But with that sort of proof of work algorithm of searching for the Mooncat, your computer had to do some processing time, so you kind of paid with time. You couldn't mint 5,000 of them in 1 second, even though your processor could probably go that fast. Because there was a proof of work built into it, your computer, a normal computer processing for it, would probably only find like 1 Mooncat every few minutes in terms of the seed there. So the rescued ones were free except for the time to mint. The Genesis ones were designed to be released 16 at a time for a set auctioned price, that they would go directly to the adoption center and be available to be purchased to adopt for an increasing amount of ether, but released by the original creators of the contract in batches of 16. But they were not, unlike a block timer that would automatically be released, they were manually triggered by the development team. And after the project sort of fell away and they let the project just go into a stasis, they didn't release all of them. And so in March of 2021, when the project was rediscovered, it was in a state where, according to the original lore and idea of the project, all the Genesis Mooncats should have been released, but they just hadn't been triggered yet. There were still several batches of Genesis Mooncats that were waiting for the admin key to signal now is the time to be added to the adoption center. And so the question with the community was, you got excited and rediscovered this project in this state where not all 25,600 are released. There's still several that are locked up and just unavailable to be part of the collection. Do we want to keep it that way, or do we want to release these additional ones, but they will all be Genesis Mooncats? It will not be any more rescued Mooncats. And so the initial development team decided to put it to a community vote of the people who had rediscovered the project. What do you want us to do? The original key was a private key held by the 2 original developers. Should we destroy it and therefore destroy the key, locking the contract from releasing those Mooncats, or should we hold on to it and figure out what we want to do with these in the future? And at that point, the vote was had to destroy that private key and to essentially lock them. And so that's the lore became, those Mooncats were not taken from the moon. They are still on the moon. And those, what are we at, 160 Genesis Mooncats were left as guardians of the ones that are still on the moon.
And they are doing a very good job up there. Tell me a little bit about some of the rare cats that Ponderware owns, specifically Mooncat Zero with its own Twitter account. Are there any intentions to sell any of these or auction it off, similar to what happened with Mr. Moo, or are they just hanging out for now?
With that one, yes, Mooncat number 0, the first one rescued, which was of the first rescued, is not a Genesis Mooncat, a rescued one, is owned by the development team and has become essentially a mascot for the company. He was recently listed for sale if someone wants to grab him, and I believe the intention is to leave that for sale as an option. There are a few others that the development team rescued very early on. Indeed, the avatar Mooncat that WanderWonder uses is number 22. So one of the very early first day ones is now his own avatar Mooncat. And a few others. Mr. Moo was one of the ones that I believe was a development team rescue that was then their own one to auction off. And part of those auctions that have happened of development team Mooncats in the last several months partially was due to just taking the profits of the project. The original plan for the contract was that the sale of all Genesis Mooncats would be the kickback that the development team would earn off of it, because the rescued Mooncats were free. Their original design was the Genesis sale of the Genesis Mooncats would be their profit they would take as a company. However, there's actually a bug in the code that profit does not go to the development team. It goes to the burn address. So actually, of the original rescue, 0 revenue went back to the development team for that. And so with the rediscovery, they did, auction off some of their Mooncats to take some profit from the project that they've now had for 4 years for that piece, which the original rescue itself did not bring anything back to them as a company.
Yeah, it is rightfully deserved. That is an unfortunate bug. That explains why everything disappeared for a few years. One final question, which was a question that came up on Twitter a lot. Are there any plans or intentions to build on layer 2?
So yes, with an asterisk beside it. We're definitely exploring L2 opportunities. We are in discussion with a couple of different companies, including Polygon, but we really haven't set anything down in stone yet. One of the things that we think about when entering into these partnerships is we are pretty protective of the Mooncat ecosystem, and any L2 opportunities, we want to make sure that whoever we're partnering with is going to be with us long term. And so if there's a chain folks are like specifically interested in seeing, like, say, potentially sports ball on, shoot us a tweet at Ponderware.
Awesome. Awesome.
Before we get out, one thing, or just to expand on that, from the technical piece, we talked a little bit about like the way that the Cuddle game launched, and even though it was in beta, it got a lot of players right away. It does kind of speak to the community right now in general in the Ethereum ecosystem, is very much that people are high risk, high reward, sorts of willing to take on a lot of risk at the slimmest chance of a reward. That we as Ponderware are also trying to take seriously our role as guardian of. Even if we put it out there as a risky option, we realize people will potentially jump on it, and wanting to make sure we're doing the due diligence on behalf of people as well, that we are confident that something is solid, that, looking at the technical backing of those layer 2s, figuring out, what is the risk profile of the chain completely disappearing, or some of the bridge interactions, that, there was a fairly high profile hack recently of the Polygon exchange, not the Polygon chain, sort of a thing. Those sort of technical, or rather the smart contract risks of moving something from an L1 to an L2, we're taking very seriously to figure out that if we put our stamp of approval on something, we want it to be rock solid, that as people utilize it, that it's not an additional inherent risk, that we can minimize that as much as possible, the transition from L1 to L2 if we use it.
That is very important to take into account. Before we get out of here, one final question for each of you. This was actually in the Discord yesterday, the debate about favorite Mooncats, favorite coat, favorite expression, favorite stance, and direction. We'll start with Anna Marie.
I love shy Mooncats. I think they are the most adorable. Beyond that, I'm actually red-green colorblind. So it's not that I don't like red and green cats as much as I don't see them properly. And so I love blue and purple Mooncats the best.
How about you, Brooks?
For me, I'm also team blue. Blue has been one of my favorite colors for a while. Also fits with my name of Midnight. Midnight blue is a common refrain there. And I do like the smiling expression for the having a cat with personality, and also being if it's going to be a spacefaring cat that has an expression, let's go for an expression that a earthbound cat might be more rare to have, of an actual grin. And that's why when picking my avatar Mooncat, I didn't pick the first blue one that I rescued, but actually one of the ones that was a little bit later in the series that was a smiling one, to be able to have that expression when picking for those. So yes, my favorites will be the blues. I do like the tortoiseshell as well pattern, which is depicted as kind of the half and half face for Mooncats. That fits my personality of the cats that I have owned in real life. In my childhood, I had a tortoiseshell cat, and now that I am grown and have a family of my own, and we decided to get a pet, the cat that we did get is also a tortoiseshell pattern, and so she has a half and half face, and so that definitely has resonated with me as well.
I love it. Where do I send everyone who's listening to learn more about Ponderware, or anything else that you'd like to mention before we get out of here?
We are found on Twitter at Ponderware, or you can go to mooncat.community for our website.
Incredible. Thank you. Thank both of you for coming on. You guys have incredible transparency for a dev team. So I'm honored to be able to sit here and talk with you guys. Love the Mooncat community and what you guys do, and see you guys in New York.
Talk soon.
Sounds good. Excellent to talk with you.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you next time.